So Zack Snyder unleashes a bold and bloody version of Norse mythology in this adult animation. Feels like it's a little on the nose, but it's an animated series from the director, and it's about a warrior who has an axe to grind. Yeah, that pun was in the log line. Twilight of the Gods just released on Netflix this weekend, and I heard so much about it online that I was like, well, I have to take a look. And so I went to go check it out. I wasn't a big fan of Zack Snyder's director's cut of Red Moon, and I have some opinions when it comes to a lot of his storytelling, so I figured at least maybe in an animation setting, I might be able to see more of just the storytelling and less of that very clear, very distinct Zack Snyder, like slow-mo and things. A lot of the stuff that's become sort of cliche when it comes to Zack Snyder, I figured we get an opportunity to see something maybe a little bit different, or at least something that might resonate a little differently. Oh yeah, it's different. So first thing, let me tell you, and let me give you a warning. I know that this is an animated thing. And you saw in the thumbnail a picture of animation stuff. Understand something, this is not for kids. If you're thinking, oh great, another fantasy thing, I can give it to my kids to watch, this is by definition adult animation. I don't normally hedge my reviews like that, except that I don't normally review stuff like this, but I've made a promise I'm gonna start reviewing some more things, so I sat down and binged the whole thing. This is one of those unique things where there's a lot of adult moments, mainly because you're dealing with Vikings, you're dealing with Norse mythology, you're dealing with, and by the way, they're not doing your classic everyday Sunday school Norse mythology. This isn't Thor from the MCU. This is Norse mythology the way it was actually intended. So there's a lot of blood, a lot of gore, and shockingly, a lot of sex. The story is essentially about Sigrid, who is a female Jotun. She's a half giant. Her mother was on her father's side. Her father was a giant, her mother was human, and she is out for revenge. And she newly engaged to her husband, who's a Viking. She goes back, takes him home to Jotun, her realm, and while there, she encounters, while she's going to get married, you find Thor, who shows up with Balder, and they're both looking for Loki. As it turns out, in his rage, which, if you know anything about mythology, is very common for Thor, he wreaks havoc and kills the entire village, barely by simply overlooking them, Sigrid and her husband. This takes her on an entire adventure of revenge, fueled by Loki's desire to bring about Ragnarok, and ultimately it goes to a place that I wasn't really expecting. Okay. So that's the short version, that's the summarized version. Now we can get into the beat. I'm not going to go into all the story beats. Watch the thing if you want. Again, watch out for your kids for the most part. But it wasn't that this was bad. I need you to understand, it's not bad. The storytelling's a little stiff in places, but overall, I was right. When you just give Zack Snyder, when you take just Zack Snyder's story, and you don't bog it down by some of the cinematic things that we're used to seeing that become so cliche, you almost can't get past them. There's a story here. It's definitely a variation. I would say the same amount of story that this is the same kind of variation that happened in 300. Now, Zack Snyder didn't write 300, but that was Frank Miller. But at the same time, it's got that same feel in terms of you taking something that is mythology, historical, whatever, and you ultimately make it more action-packed, action-driven. You skew it for an audience that is more modern, has more modern sensibility, okay? It stars Sylvia Hoeks as the voice of Siegfried, Stuart Martin as Leif, her husband, betrothed, Pilo Asbeck, who plays Thor. Of course, you're going to recognize Raoul Kahuli as Egil. And then there's a whole litany of other characters, all of which are doing an amazing job setting the tone. There was only really a couple of times where I thought that the script deviated in terms of being a little modern-y sounding. That's that whole Xena / Hercules of old type effect where it's people from a fantasy setting speaking a somewhat more modernized English. And they only happened like once or twice. Not enough to take me out of it. So overall, it's 8 episodes. They're a half hour each. And they're done in a very modern animated style. By that I mean they're not animated where there's lines around the outsides like you'd see like in the X-Men 97 or some other popular animation styles. This goes for that more modern, almost flat style. So literally but it isn't CG. It's funny. At one point I said to myself, is this similar to Klaus? But they don't use any of the real hand-drawn portions of it. You can definitely tell this is a very digitally put together movie, which again, isn't a dig against it. I do love the fact that there's a couple moments where they do, in big fight scenes, give you a type of slow motion, which I give more credit than most people might want to give, because you have to understand, doing slow motion in animation is not easy. Oh yeah, it's really difficult, because you have to, in essence, make sure that you're now animating 3 to 4 times as many moments in that to get it super slow motion down, but still keep it smooth. So definitely kudos to the team for that. The story, it tells a solid story. And there's several, and what's funny is it doesn't go off course, though you take a couple of rabbit trails here and there. In essence, you follow them as they go through some various realms, she pulls together her own type of, she swears upon everything that she will see the death of Thor, but then it gets deeper than that. So there's a seer who's named Hervor, who's wow. Yeah, the seer is one of my favorite characters. She's black magic, but also she's got divination that she can see. And at one point, she gets called up by Odin, who wants to have a conversation. Odin, by the way, voiced by John Noble, so we get a really, really great performance from him. He sits here and he has a conversation with her, and he essentially says, I want to be able to see the future. I want you to tell me, does my son survive? Do we survive? She shows him a glimpse of the future. It costs him his memories. So he has 2 birds, one that sees the future and one that sees the past, and she kills the bird that sees the past. She herself dies as well, only to be resurrected as a little demigod. But when she shows him the future, the downfall of the Norse gods is Jesus Christ. Oh yeah, you get to see the crucifixion, and then they show the temple and all this other stuff of the gods, the Norse gods, and then it crossfades into a modern day city with cars and everything, church. It looks like a cathedral building. And I'm like, well, I definitely didn't see that coming. And it's such because she's like, no, I've seen the fall. It all ends today. This is where it starts. And this is this and that. And so it's, anyway, yeah, so there you go. Now you know. And if knowing's half the battle, you're halfway where you know it all yourself. Definitely, I would, again, I cannot hedge this enough. Don't let your kids watch it. It's, when I say there's mature and adult moments, there's mature and adult moments to the point that I'm almost shocked that they're able to show this on Netflix. Now, it's a streaming service. It's the Wild West when it comes to streaming and stuff, so you can get away with a whole lot. But man, had I known going in what I was going to experience, I might have rethought reviewing this. But since I'm here, in for a penny, in for a pound. Comment below. Let me know what you thought. But what is the Know-It-All Index for Twilight of the Gods? The entire series, all 8 episodes. I'm going to give this a solid 6.5 out of 10. Not for anything else other than the fact that the story is a little broken at times, and you try to keep track. The animation's beautiful. You'll enjoy Sigurd's overall story. The subplots sort of go off the rails, but for the most part, it's not bad. It's a fun time. Again, don't watch it with your kids. We'll talk again soon. Do me a favor, comment below. Let me know what you thought of this review of Twilight of the Gods. If you've seen it, let me know what you thought, because holy man, it is insane. All right, guys, I'll talk again very soon. Never forget, everyone loves a know-it-all.